Welcome back to the Leading in Athletics podcast. This is Heath Esslinger. If you've been listening to us from the beginning, we've been on a journey. That journey is to help create alignment between coaches and parents in all sorts of sport organizations across the country and even around the world. We want to transform these places through parent engagement, coaching development, and director and administrator training. Here's what we know. Parenting and coaching are both difficult jobs, but we're on a mission to do one thing: help restore the joy of sport for everyone involved in the athletic journey. Most importantly, those kids whom we say we care so much about. We'd love for you to come alongside us and help us to reach this ambitious goal. If you'd like to learn more, you can follow us on any of our social media platforms. Simply search A Better Way Athletics. You can also visit us at our website at www.abetterwayathletics.com. Again, that's abetterwayathletics.com. And are you in for a treat today? I have followed, stalked, tried to learn from this family over the past 7 years. I met them, doing a presentation in Florida for the National Wrestling Coaches Association. Our guest today, Todd and Stacy Rucci. When Miss Stacy sent me their bio, I was almost like awestruck. She said yesterday, "I'm not sure we're worthy to be on here. Here's what I can tell you. You are our most decorated family yet to come on the Better Way Leadership and Athletics podcast." Todd Rucci, youngest of 3 boys, went to Upper Darby High School, 4-sport athlete, played at Penn State, drafted as the 51st pick in the second round of the 1993 draft to the New England Patriots, played 8 seasons, started in the 1997 Super Bowl versus the Green Bay Packers, is on the New England Patriots all-decade team. If that's not enough, he's been coached by Joe Paterno, Bill Parcells, Pete Carroll, and Bill Belichick. Now serves as the D-line and O-line coach at Warwick High School, where their season was just cut short because of a pandemic. They were 8-0. His wife, the other half, he may say the better half of the Rucci family, Miss Stacy, was quite an athlete herself. She was the 4th of 5 kids. Mom and dad, Tom and Joanne. Her dad was on the national championship Syracuse football team that had Ernie Davis, the first Black Heisman Trophy winner. Dad went on to play for the Baltimore Colts for 5 years before getting into coaching. And not only did he coach football, but he also coached lacrosse at several places. She is a graduate of Manheim Township High School. That's wrestling country. 3-sport athlete. First team All-American her senior year. Coached at Stanford, coached at Duke, was the head coach at Elizabethtown College. She's been a volunteer field hockey coach at Warwick High School for 5 years. And most importantly, she is an absolutely phenomenal mom. They have 2 sons, Nolan, who's a senior at Warwick, and Hayden, who's a redshirt sophomore at Wisconsin University. So you guys have been a petri dish in the athletic world as individuals. And then you got married, you had children, and now all of a sudden you're kind of doing it over as a mom and dad. So the first question I have for you, your sons, Hayden and Nolan, both one at University of Wisconsin right now, another one headed there this next year. You're doing this, you're doing it well. But here's the first question for you. You guys met in a unique way. All right? Tell us how you met.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Well, we were freshmen at Penn State in 1988, back when you had the old Walkman, like with the cassette tape.
And yeah. And not even a CD, a cassette tape.
Not even a CD. It was a cassette tape. And I was icing my back in the hallway of study hall. And it was the one year that Joe Paterno allowed football players to do study hall with female athletes. He never did it before and never did it again. And this big old guy comes like lumbering down the hall and he's like, "Oh, you have to listen to this song." Didn't even say hello, just said, "You have to listen to this song." So he hands me the Walkman and I put the headphones on. I'm thinking, oh, it's 1988. It's going to be like Belle Biv DeVoe, I'll Be Sure, like someone like that. It was Rick Astley singing Nat King Cole's song, "When I Fall in Love, It Will Be Forever."
Oh my gosh. Todd's got game.
Great.
Todd's got game.
Thanks. And then that is the song that we danced to, our first song at our wedding.
Yep.
That was 11 years later. after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So Todd, let me ask you this. You're walking down that hallway, big lumbering guy, you're listening to your music. What was it about Stacy?
Well, I mean, I had scouted her for 2.5 months, got a
All
40
right.
time on her, watched her work out. She had great agility. She was hot. She was smart. I did all this work pregame. So I had everything set up, game time. It was going at 7:30 was study hall. So I figured I'd go in at 7:35, had the music all teed up, had the whole thing planned out, I'm going straight corny because I know I'm going to blow her away, and boom, worked like a charm.
That is so I always say this: success requires two things. You ready? Specifics and sacrifice. And brother, you nailed it, man.
Oh yeah.
You were specific. You had made the sacrifice. You had done a scouting report. You had counted the cost. Like that is impressive, man. Elite people are elite in every area. And so, you guys grew up in the athletic world. Give me maybe one thing that the athletic journey really birthed in you or cultivated in each of you as you look back on your career. And obviously y'all's careers were much longer than most. Like, what's the takeaway? Why is athletics valuable for young people today?
Oh man. I mean, where do you start? I think it's even more evident today with everything going on in the world. And, I came from just outside the inner city of Philadelphia, in the suburbs, growing up, pretty diverse group of kids from running the gamut of, the socioeconomic kind of graph. And I think the biggest thing in sports, and we talk about it with our kids, when you step on the competitive field, it doesn't matter what car you drove in there with. It doesn't matter who dropped you off. It doesn't matter, how expensive your cleats are. It doesn't matter how many camps you went to. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, religion, political side, like all that stuff is left at the gate. So when you step on that field and you're competing against someone else or trying to earn a spot, it all comes down to a simple thing. Who's better at that position at that time? As a matter of fact, who's better at that position that day at that time?
Yeah.
When you strip away all of that, and that's the pure sense of, the competitive battle. And when you do that, day in and day out, next to kids who may not look like you, who come from, live in different streets, different houses and parents. And I think you learn to realize real quick what the competitive field is about. And I think that's the pure essence of, competition in general. And if you can grasp that and kind of, flourish in that, I think it leads well into how you should walk the rest of the days on this earth and treat each other. Because none of that stuff matters. It just doesn't matter,
Man, as you say that, like it's crazy because you I see these combative situations in football and whether it's basketball, wrestling, but like the word that comes to my mind as you articulated that's just beautiful. I mean, like when you talk about checking all of those things at the gate, the price of your cleats, the kind of car you drive, your socioeconomic status, your race, your academic intelligence, your height, your weight, whatever. All of a sudden, when those things are stripped away, real relationships can be formed. And man, if we can do that I get chill bumps thinking about it. Like if we can create spaces for that to take place in the lives of our kids, we'll see the best generation that's ever walked the face of the earth. The question becomes, why do we let that get like almost, why do we let those things become more important? And we'll go there in a little bit. Stacy, what about you? I mean, what did the sport journey do for you?
Yeah, it's funny that you said relationships because my first thing is friendships. I mean, when I look back at, my career, like my one friend is we're all kind of turning 50 this year. Todd and I already turned 50 this year. And then now a couple of my friends one is turning 50 next week. Her husband, one of my teammates from Penn State, her husband just texted me. He was like, hey, hopefully this won't play, that she won't hear it. But he's trying to get everyone to do like a little video message for her. So I'm like rolling down my phone to send him all the contacts of people. And it's just as like just even this morning, I just thought about like all my dear friends from Penn State. And it is, and we'll probably get to this later, but the last 4 years, I have had the pleasure of flying the drone at their football practices. Nolan, our younger son, used to do it. And then when he went into high school, Todd looked at me, he's like, do you want to learn how to fly the drone? I'm like,
Nice.
well, I have to. But it has honestly been like a joy for me because I don't really talk to them that much. I just kind of stand there and I put the drone up but it allows me to watch all these kids and their relationships and their like how they're cheering for like the worst kid on the team. They're all cheering
love
for
it.
him when he gets the ball at practice.
Yes.
Well, I shouldn't even say he's the worst kid, but it just like it just like that. And then this year we had 5 kids come back and help coach, and 3 of them were there because of COVID because their programs got canceled or pushed to the spring. So I watched 5 kids that grew up in Warwick and they chose to come back, or it was maybe even 6 that chose to come back and help coach, and to watch them with not only with their relationships with each other, but with the coaches that coach them, and now the kids that are playing. It's just, I have goosebumps just talking about it. And so to me, it's definitely about that relationship, and exactly what I never really thought about it the way I've never heard Todd say that before, but just that, there are so many different walks of life coming onto a field, and watching them all work together it's like I would always text the senior moms like, you guys, I just want to let you know, like, it is just so refreshing to see your sons like to be leaders and to be like they were on Zoom calls last week because last week we couldn't practice, and just I text the mom like, if you can listen in on the Zoom call, listen in, because the coaching is just so awesome. Like it's just like little stuff like that. So.
And it's fun to celebrate those things. And that's what we long for our kids to be a part of. Brooke, my oldest daughter, they lost in the sub-state of their volleyball tournament this year. And, someone asked me, they were like, man, were they so disappointed that they lost? And I was like, you know what was beautiful? It wasn't that they were disappointed they lost. They were so sad it was over. Because they had such healthy I mean, like literally, I'll get emotional talking about it. Like, cause like we were so lucky to be a part of a program where it's like, dude, just the right things were put on the spotlight. Yeah. And if we do that, here's what you can trust. You'll get really good outcomes. You know what I mean? You'll get really good outcomes. And so from a parent and a coach, it's so easy to get pulled away into the wrong things though. And so, I mean, obviously you guys competed at a high level, your kids have competed at a high level. How have you created like maybe boundaries and a roadmap to say, hey, here's what's most important. Here's how I always say this. I want to raise a child where leaning isn't necessary. Hey, you can lean on me at times. Like it's good. I still lean on my parents at times. I just asked my dad a question the other day. But it's not necessary. Like I can walk on my own 2 feet. And that's kind of been y'all's mission there to do that when they're ready, they can go. But what are some things you guys have done as a family to cultivate that type of behavior and mindset?
I think I don't think it's specific to, sports in general. I think one of the things, like effort for us is everything. If you are going to, and we don't care what it is, but if in the classroom, projects, friendships, it's effort. So you need to be present. You need to be there. You need to put time and effort into it. If it's meaningful to you, it's got to be meaningful to you, not mom or dad. And specifically with sports, we always try to get them in everything. So we want you to, swimming, soccer, baseball. They did lacrosse. They did everything. Wrestling, for a couple months. But whatever they did, we didn't necessarily push to any of them. We just wanted to make sure here's the opportunity. Now find out what you like. But if you're going to do this, you got to put all out effort into it. And if you don't like it, then let's take it off your plate, because if you don't want to do it, then pull it off. It's no use, getting involved. And I think with football for us, and specifically for me, I grabbed both my guys when they came from, the youth league going up to middle school, and then they were about to take the field as a high school football player. I made sure I grabbed them and said, look, if you're going to play this game, you have got to make sure that you want to do this for you. This has got to be your decision, because the game of football, 90% of this game sucks. It's just hard. It sucks. But don't play because dad played, Stacy's dad, played in the league. Like, don't play because, mom or dad or your grandfather played this game. You have got to play this because you love it. And if you don't want to play this, we are absolutely good with it. Like, I don't care whether you play. All I care, if you do play, make sure you're playing for the right reasons. So, and I wholeheartedly believe that. Listen, my kids played the game, love it. We have a lot of things in common to share. But if they didn't, I would absolutely be great. All I cared about, you got to be a great human being.
Yes.
And fortunately, our guys have been around some great people. That, number one, they're great human beings. And that makes them, very prepared and do well on the battlefield of football, just because the character of those two individuals is strong.
And one of the things we always say is it's unfortunate in our culture today, we see a lot of this. And Stacy, you may have heard me say this before, but we see kids today with gifts and skills. I mean, kids are more talented and like skilled than we've ever seen there's 8th graders doing things with a football that college kids weren't doing 25 years ago. But what's unfortunate is we see young people with gifts and skills that get them to a room that their character won't allow them to stay. And what I've loved about you guys, and like you stalked Stacy, I've kind of stalked you guys just, and watched your journey, is that you've really put a priority on the character development of your boys. That way, if football's in their cards, great. When they get to that room and they get to the University of Wisconsin, they have the character to stay, because everyone now has the gifts and skills. When you get to the league, listen, everyone's got the gifts and skills. It's, hey, who can show up every day? Who can give great effort when they don't feel their best? Who can be humble and be coachable, when you've had a ton of success already? And that's really my heartbeat for parents, is to go, listen, you can catch them up on the gifts and skills, but if you miss the character piece, it's hard to implement at 18 years old. And so what are some things, maybe Stacy, that you guys have done to make that important in your home?
Well, it's funny that you use that quote, because I actually, I stalked your podcast and things like that. I wrote that very quote down when I'm trying to think who you were interviewing from ESPN.
Jason Romano.
Yes. I wrote that down because I was like, oh my God, that is when going through this recruiting process, that is it. I mean, you have all of these colleges, and we're very fortunate enough to look at a ton of colleges, but that is what we loved about Wisconsin, is that they had so many of those character guys. And that, I think, is what drew, and not saying that other schools didn't, but it was the type that meshed with our sons at Wisconsin. But leading up into that, I was thinking about this earlier. People keep asking me how did you get the kids through, or how did you do this so well? And I'm like, I don't think it's really any one thing that we did. I just feel like we tried to be, as present as we could. And whether that was, I think I always think that they're so smart, because I read all 7 of the Harry Potter series out loud to them. That's why they're smart.
Oh my goodness! For all the parents out there.
Yeah.
That's
the first book
number
I
one.
All the accents, and then I was like, oh yeah, no, we're not doing this. But anyway, that and I would play Thomas the Tank with them. I was like the Lego queen. I pushed them on their swings for 45 minutes. We literally did every activity. They did a gymnastics thing at our local gym. They did wrestling for a year and a half, but then they were in kindergarten and first grade. They'd have to wrestle against the 5th graders because they were so big and heavy.
Yeah.
That didn't last as long as we would like it to. So I just feel and even swimming, they were really good swimmers. And all the parents sitting around us would have their stopwatches, and they'd be like, oh, what was their time? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, they did great, but I have absolutely no idea what their time was.
I love it.
This is it just always came back to effort. And that's what, and even if we saw kids getting reamed out by their parents, or like one time we were at a stop sign turning left to go home, and there was a car with a kid and his parent in the car right next to us, and we kind of looked over at the same time and saw this dad just like screaming at his son. And I looked at Hayden and I just said, listen, just, feel bad for him, but just know that is never going to happen to you. It's never, you will never see even if you didn't have like the best effort, you will never get screamed at like that. Like, yeah, I've probably screamed at my kids for whatever reason, but after a game, absolutely no way. I mean, I like even Todd coaching with him with the for the boys since they were in 6th grade, and I coached Nolan. I coached Nolan in boys lacrosse for 6 years. Like when he was in 3rd grade, they didn't have any coaches. So, and my dad played lacrosse at Syracuse, and he was like 70 at the time. I was like, hey Dad, do you want to be my assistant? So I got him out of retirement, and my dad was my assistant for 6 years, and we coached boys lacrosse. So the poor kid had both his parents coaching him. But it just, like, again, it just went back to like, we always just kind of pushed the effort thing, and never, I don't think we ever said anything about performance or anything like that.
And that's what I was going to say. As I follow you guys and see your boys and kind of watch your story, and I think summed up, here's what I would say you guys have done a great job of is focusing on who they were becoming, not what they were doing or achieving. Mm-hmm. And so many times, man, when we start focusing on what they're doing or achieving, man, it can take us down a dangerous road, because we start thinking that's a validation with us on us as a parent. And it's like, no, who they're becoming is the story of me as a parent. And even then, listen, it doesn't mean your kids are going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. But if you don't start out with the mindset of, hey, my job is to cultivate the things that will allow them to become successful in anything they choose. I love what Tim Elmore says, don't prepare the path for the child, prepare the child for the path. And I'm a huge Tim Elmore fan. Yeah. But, like that's really what you're doing and what you guys have done a great job of. I also love this, because listen, your dad's an NFL football player, like you said, you're in kindergarten wrestling 5th graders because you're massive, and you had them in swimming. And I always tell parents at some point in your child's career, they have to participate in a sport. That's what I called self-inflicted suffering. Because here's the thing about life. If you can learn to suffer, you can find a way to be successful. But if you struggle with suffering, you are going to have a hard time being successful. Because 90% of football, Todd, is what?
Suffering.
Sucks. You know what I mean? It's not fun. You know what I mean? And so, Todd, anything you would add? I saw your wheels turning as Stacy was talking when it comes to that character development and maybe y'all's mindset toward that for your boys. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think there's just so much. I think, I've been fortunate enough to share a lot of the important moments in coaching. So I've always walked this, and people ask, like, I didn't know whether I was going to enjoy coaching my kids, number one. Mm-hmm. I didn't know if it would be a good, healthy relationship early on. But as when Hayden started playing youth football, I went down, I was coaching high school at the time, and then started helping out the youth football also. And it was the first time that I, on a competitive, football being, a competitive nature, that here I am watching my kid, sometimes getting pounded by some dudes, and sometimes, going after other kids, violence and all. So it was more me of understanding that I really need to draw that bright line between father and coach. Mm-hmm. And I learned real early that if we were going to walk this journey of football together, that I needed to make sure I was on the right side of that line during football time and on dad time.
Hey, will you say that one more time? Because there's a lot of parents coaching their kids. And so talk about that line one more time and what you had to do, because that is so good.
I think it's probably the most critical thing in my relationship with my boys is to make sure, number one, I'm their father. Mm. So, but I was also their football coach. And I think it was, for me, it wasn't them. It was me, had to be disciplined to make sure that when practice was over If practice ended at 6 o'clock and we walked off that field, as soon as we left the field, when we were walking in there, I was now dad, period. And there are probably a million things in my head that I wanted to talk to them about. Maybe you missed this block, or you need to do this, or your effort here. Never, ever did I go there unless they asked. And I'd be very guarded on how much we talked about it, but I never talked coaching when we stepped off the field. Only. Now, when we were on the field, hey, I'm reaming them just like the right guard, the left guard, and they were just as hard as anyone else.
Yeah.
But that bright line of making sure I was on the right side of dad was dad after practice, but dad was coach when we were on that field. That has been a great experiment for me, I think personally, just to understand and to watch my boys experience all those great high times and all the terrible low times, whether they're team oriented, individually oriented, and watch them struggle. And as a coach, give them something to kind of help them work through that. And just have a front row seat at watching them grow. But making sure, I think that's probably the biggest thing that's helped me personally, and I think help our relationship as dad and coach, is just making sure that, I don't intertwine any of those, and I don't step over the boundary of coach and dad. And it's worked out pretty well. I've really enjoyed coaching my guys. You'd have to ask them.
Yeah. Next week's interview is with Nolan and Hayden. All right. The truth comes out. No.
Yeah.
No, I applaud you for drawing that line. We live in a culture that hates boundaries. What I always say is, like, dude, boundaries don't limit you. They actually liberate you. If you go the speed limit, you get to pass the cop and wave. I'm usually not going the speed limit, so I'm hitting the brakes. My heart rate's up. You know what I mean? I'm looking for did he pull out, or did she pull out?
Yeah.
And so, like, when you draw that line, it's a boundary just to say, hey, this needs to be in place in order for us to accomplish what we know we want to accomplish long term. We teach it a better way. Our first principle we teach parents is, don't get so consumed with what matters now that you lose sight of what matters most. And really, you drawing that line says, hey, I'm not going to get so caught up in this that I lose sight that I'm their father. At 30 years old, I'm still their father. When they're 40, I'm still their father. At 70, they may ask me to coach lacrosse with them. Who knows? You know what I mean? But I'm their father. And to me, that's called maturity. The ability to understand how the decisions I make today affect my future. And unfortunately, in Heath Esslinger's life, and I think we see it in a lot of cases today, is like, we don't exercise maturity. And so that line, if it's not there, we end up spending so much time and space in another arena that's not healthy.
Yeah, no doubt. I say this all the time. If I would not want my O-line coach to be living in my house.
Yeah, that's a great.
True. It would be horrible. That would be the most uncomfortable environment ever. So I want dad. Like, I'm dad. You want to talk about football? Hey, well, I'll talk to you about it, but we're not going there.
That is that might be the quote of the day right there, and there's many. And so what's been one of the most difficult obstacles or challenges to navigate with your kids when it comes to athletics? Because they're there. I mean, the beauty of athletics, it presents some obstacles and challenges. What's been one of the biggest challenges and I want to address this as a family, you know what I mean? Like, where you guys had to really wrestle or hold yourself back or make a tough decision. What's one of the biggest challenges?
Well, I think just with being a multi-sport athlete, and you are like huge on that. And that's why, like, we definitely had them in all their, so then once they were heading into high school, they were down to football, basketball, and lacrosse. Mm-hmm. And so I think as a family, the hardest one was like, do you have to give that up? Do you have to give one of them up? Do you have to give two of them up? Do you have to, like, because nowadays every coach wants that kid to be doing that sport year round, and more so in high school. And at our high school, we're like a medium size high school. They graduate, a class of like 300 to 350 kids. You need all of your best athletes to be doing multi-sports. So, and Todd was a 4-sport athlete. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and we we're like, oh, our kids are doing all 3 sports, like all 4 years. And so we had to get over ourselves a little bit and then just see that it just was so hard to do it with effort, with that effort that you wanted to, like how do you, but even when they were little, like when they were doing swimming, like in baseball, like the baseball coach, like could not believe that they would miss something for swimming. Like they just could not believe that. I'm like, well, they're in both. So that's
I'm with you.
doing. Yeah. And so that like, and so when it got to high school, we just had to be like, all right, are you passionate about it? Are you still passionate about it? And if you are not, then, make it through a season, but then think about it after the season. And so by the sophomore year, they were down to, I think Hayden ended up playing just lacrosse also his junior year, but Nolan could not play. His back, just his growth and back issues, he had to step away from lacrosse freshman year and then ended up not going back to it. And then he gave up basketball after sophomore year. And so I feel like it killed us to be like, oh my gosh, they're just graduating playing one sport. Like, what is that? But it just, that's like a little bit of an ego thing. So I think that once we kind of and then plus recruiting was just like, we did not see the whole recruiting monster coming at all, because our recruiting was like our senior year.
The game has changed.
So that was like a full-time job in and of itself. So it just wasn't, I applaud like the recruits out there that are still doing like they're still doing multi-sports, because I do think it's really, 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 really difficult. So
I have a theory on this, and I would love to hear your take, because we see a lot more kids just playing a single sport. And I'm a big fan of multi-activity. You know what I mean? It's not just multi-sport, it's just be well-rounded. You know what I mean? Like, there's times where parents can't do 4 or 5 sports. They can't afford it, or maybe it's a single mom. Like, for the parents listening out there, you don't need to feel guilty. You know what I mean? The goal is to raise a well-rounded and whole human, you know what I mean, who's ready for this thing we call life. And so, but one of the theories I have is that you also have today a lot less 3-sport coaches. Used to, if you were a good coach, man, you were probably like the head baseball coach, the head football coach, assistant basketball coach, and heck, you helped with track on the side. And so you didn't mind sharing your athletes because you shared you. And today we live in a society where it's like, you got a guy who's like, he thinks he's like a, Division I wrestling coach because he just runs a 10-year-old wrestling club. You know what I mean?
Right.
And all of a sudden he thinks he's, Dan Gable. So that creates selfishness in him. Well, if my identity's wrapped up in this, well, I got to have Todd there full time.
Yeah.
And so everything boils down to ego and perspective. Like, and so I applaud you guys for wrestling with that, because a lot of people in your shoes would be like, dude, give those up. You have a future in football. You know what I mean? Like, let's not roll the dice on getting hurt. There's a great documentary called In Search of Greatness.
Ooh,
and it's so, you guys will love it. And it looks at 3 guys, Jerry Rice, Wayne Gretzky, and Pele. And so one of the things that they talk about is like, kids just need to learn how to economize movement. You have an 8-year-old that he has a great baseball swing, but he can't shuffle left and right. You know what I mean? I'm like, listen, eventually the kid that can shuffle, he'll get some lessons too, and he'll crush the ball way further than your kid. Yeah. And so I think parents, though, the fear is, well, they're going to get behind. They're going to get behind. And I always say, quit worrying about whether or not they're behind and start asking, where do you want to finish? And if you're a little bit behind at 8 and 9, it's okay, because no one cares.
Nolan was a lot of it behind.
Oh, Nolan's a mess. Yeah.
we were like, oh dear. Like in flag football, he was going to the wrong huddle. Like he was, he did not know how to block. He just was like, oh my God. He fell asleep during a soccer game. His soccer game, he fell asleep on the sideline, like on the bench.
But here's what a lot of parents would do.
We laughed about it, really.
Yeah.
Parents would freak out over that. Well, he doesn't love it. He's not. I'm like, he's 8.
Yeah.
Like, like so many times we are so eager for our kid to have a breakthrough that I think we cause them to have a breakdown.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, just this is it's a crock pot, man. It's a slow cooker. You know what I mean? Like, just cultivate the right the right things. What about for you, Todd? One of the challenges that you look back on?
Yeah, I think that's, you hit home on one of the things that we kind of hold dear as far as, my biggest thing is if you're going to compete in the athletic realm, number one, you got to be an athlete.
Yeah.
Period.
Hands down.
So I don't care whether you're playing basketball, football, swimming, wrestling. I don't care. If you can have your body respond to what you have in your head quickly, you are an athlete. So if I want to move to the left and if I see it and I can do it, boom, you're an athlete. Now, multi-sports, multi-activity, I love that. Our kids, they ice skate, they ski, they're playing hoops, they're skateboarding, they're doing everything. Our biggest thing is just movement. And if you can keep your kids moving, have them master their own body and movement,
yes,
then we can start pushing you in a specific sport if you choose to.
That's right.
Period. And football, I think football is the absolute perfect example of, and maybe wrestling too. I think wrestling probably skill-wise, and I love wrestling for certain aspects of the competitive nature. But football, you don't have to be the biggest dude, the strongest dude, the fastest dude. You could have the guy that's built, jacked, fast, speed, all that stuff. But if he doesn't like to hit, or he doesn't like to be hit, it doesn't matter what his 40 time is.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. And you got, a little guy who's can barely run, down the 100 yards, but just tough as nails and will stick his nose in there. Like all of a sudden that becomes the football player. So for me, especially, specific to football, I wanted my kids, number one, to be athletes, just to build the core base for them. If they could move in a space, they have spatial awareness, timing, all that stuff. If they had that, then football, there's 22 positions on that field at one point, and every position. So if you like to hit and you're an athlete, man, we're going to find a position for you.
That's right.
Whatever your physical attributes are, we kind of dial in that. But number one, if you don't embrace the violence, don't like the violence, don't like the competitive nature, don't like the hurt, the suck, the grind. That
sounds like a terrible sport.
Man, if that's you, it just doesn't matter what athlete you are. So I don't know. I'm pretty simple when it comes to football's a pretty simple game. In wrestling, specifically wrestling, I would love for all of our linemen to wrestle, all football players to wrestle, because football's such a team sport. Like your right guard could have a really tough game, not play all that well, but no one's really paying attention. You score 38 points and you win, but no one knows that, Billy had a tough night on the Friday night. But all of a sudden you put Billy out on that mat under a spotlight. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to run. It's Billy and the other kid. And I think there's so much to learn, from an athletic standpoint, to be standing there on your own, to compete on your own and learn to fail on your own. So I think, all those things are just so important in building, kind of the tools for what you want your kids to become. And unfortunately, you can't hand those tools to them. I can't hand Nolan or Hayden all the things that I had to learn over, 8 years in the NFL, playing Penn State. I can't give them. I can show them. I can kind of give them some insight to when to use them. Here's what it looks like. But they're going to have to accept it, number one, and work at it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. You can't give your kids, they have to build the tools themselves. You can give them the shop, you can give them the wood, you can give them the hammer, you can give them the nails. But until they learn it, they won't have it available when they need it.
And one of the things that you guys have done is you've modeled it for your kids. I mean, you've lived it out, you've practiced. I know it's not perfect. Trust me, there's no home that's perfect, but you have a direction. I love Andy Stanley says direction always determines destination. It's not theory or intent. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not even effort, because listen, if you're running in the wrong direction, you can be running hard, but you're not going to end up where you want to be. You're actually just getting further away faster. And so what for parents out there, it's like, hey, what's where do we want to end up in this? And how do we think, long-term, but make good decisions in the moment, and things like that. And it is, man, it is just so stinking difficult. And so, couple of final questions here. You know, one, you've made some big decisions when it comes to colleges, man. I mean, you've been on that recruiting journey. How could you encourage families on the recruiting journey? And obviously you guys got to choose a very big place. It's whatever everybody wants to have 5 hats, and they're all in the Big Ten and the ACC and the SEC. It's not a reality, and it's not a knock on your kid if that doesn't happen. I know kids who go Division II and have a much greater experience and play in the league. You know, I also know kids who, Alex Highsmith, I've done some work with UNC Charlotte, Will Healy there, great head coach. And Alex Highsmith was a school start walk-on as a freshman. The guy's making tackles for the Steelers this year as a rookie, you know, but he had the intangibles, you know, he had the things that you talked about. And so how would you kind of encourage or help parents as they embrace this recruiting journey?
Well, I think that, first of all, I grew up, my dad was the head football coach at Franklin Marshall College for almost 30 years. So I literally grew up on that campus with that team, saw my dad coach, you know, hundreds and thousands of players go through that program. And I saw what an effect a Division III program had and still has to this day. Mm-hmm. My brother, I'm one of 5. We all went to 5 different colleges, but my youngest brother went there and played for my dad. And like his friends are amazing. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely have always had that Division III mentality, even though I was lucky enough to play Division I and coach Division I. I coached Division III as well. And so we're always trying to help not just, you know, our own sons get through it, but I coached field hockey at our high school. And right now I'm helping a senior out, looking at schools, and he's helping, you know, a handful of football players look at different levels of schools. So my thing would be like, always be open to whatever level. Even when we were starting our process out with Hayden, our oldest son, like he made a few calls and he's like, listen, I don't know what level he's at. Can you look at it from a non-parent viewpoint, non-coach, non-parent, and just let me, and what do you think? And so that's kind of how we started off the recruiting process. We knew we had to do it sooner than later because one of his college buddies they started like his son's junior year, and he called him. He's like, you better get started his freshman year because it was kind of late by the time we hit his junior year. So to me, like, definitely educate yourself on all the different timelines. There's so many great resources out there. Anyone can contact me at any time. I'll give you like our information if they ever have any questions about it. But I just feel like be open to everything, be so patient, and don't get like so all consumed with it. I mean, because even our kids, like all along, even though they have these wonderful opportunities, nothing is guaranteed. I mean, if they would have walked out on that field and gotten injured, then all of that would have probably gone off the table. So you just can't go around boasting about anything because you just never know when it's gonna not be there. And but I just think like patience is key, and being educated and knowing like all the opportunities that are there for you. Like even like field hockey doesn't have NAIA, but I mean, there is like people I don't think know that there are NAIA programs out there, junior college programs out there, as well as like, you know, D1, D2, and D3. But that would be my takeaway from that.
I think specific, first of all, I mean, if you have the opportunity to compete at the next level, I don't care if it's D3, D1, FBS, it doesn't matter. If you have the ability to continue playing this game at, you know, the next level, amen, fortunate. If you can use this game, number one, to get you into a school you would not be able to get into otherwise, you win. Like you beat the system. Like that's use the sport to get you ahead of the line somehow if you can do that. And it doesn't matter what level. And embrace the fact that you'll have the opportunity to play at the next level. And I don't care what level it is. I mean, you get the chance to compete. I think that's number one. And I think, you know, taking a step back, I know with our own kids, I think it's important for parents who, this is now their journey. Like, this is where you let go of their hand, you know, at the end of one path and they're beginning down another on their own. Like, this is going to be their life, their world for the next 4 or 5 years. They're going to have to go to the practice. They're going to have to be coached by that coach. They're going to have to be in that environment. This is their decision, not, you know, I think Stacy and I learned that really quick with our boys, because we really saw the fact that it didn't matter there were places that, you know, we thought we loved. You know, fortunately, the places that we thought we loved, our boys kind of gravitated to, because I think the values and the core fundamentals were the same. But at the same time, with Nolan or Arab, wherever they went, it was their decision, and we were going to be jacked for them wherever it was. And I think that has to be, you know, some foundation for the parents, just to make sure you understand that this is the point, this is the big decision now, that it's theirs.
And it goes back to that whole ego thing. Like, we definitely had to check our egos
Oh.
at the door. Like, when it came, and it wasn't, absolutely was not, had nothing to do with us. It was almost like we could ride on the coattails and go along wherever and be happy with it wherever they went. But that was like a really hard, like, sit back and be like, all right. And it's hard because you're leaving, you know, they're 18 and they're still, you know, their brains aren't fully developed. So half of you is like, well, maybe they're not developed enough to make this decision. Like, put yourself into that too.
They are, though.
But, you know, I feel like for the most part, we've prepared them to, and that's what we've done, is kind of help them make all those decisions by the time they turn 18, and hopefully they make the right ones.
Man, and it is, you have to listen. We have to weekly check our ego at the door. I mean, that thing rears its ugly head like constantly. It's just a part of our human nature, and there's part of it that can be healthy when you know how to bridle it. You know, it's like putting a bridle on a horse, man. That horse can be dangerous without a bridle, but it can accomplish a whole lot of good with the bridle on. And so, you know, I think as parents, one of the things I see in the recruiting world is we can also get caught up in comparing our child to everyone else's opportunities that we see. And sometimes the opportunities we think or we see aren't even really maybe the whole truth. And so that comparison, and it's hard in the coaching world today, and it's hard to be an athlete today because everything is so visible. I mean, when I was getting recruited, you didn't know who else was getting recruited unless you read you had to read a magazine or a newspaper or whatever. But today, I mean, they see it nonstop on these phones. And so I would say, don't let the comparison steal your joy and confidence of the journey for your child. You know, because just because your child's not getting a Big Ten offer right now, one, it doesn't mean they're not going to get one. And two, it doesn't mean that some other kid's going to have a better, you know, chance at anything in life or the next level or whatever. And so it is hard. It is so hard. But man, I want to say to you guys, no joke, like, I am such a dang fan, man. Like, I want to learn from you. I invited you onto my podcast, and I'm like going, dude, I want to like go stay with them for a week.
We'd love to have you, Heath. But honestly, like, what you're doing is so awesome too. Like, every single thing that you post on Twitter, I'm like, it speaks to who we are as a family, and it just is awesome. So, you know, keep up the awesome work that you're doing, and I can't wait to see all the exciting things that you have coming up.
You got it. Well, hey, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast, brought to you by Better Way Athletics. Thank you so much, Todd and Stacy, for taking the time to share with us today some of the things that parents are struggling with as we navigate this sport journey. Again, make sure you go follow us on social media. Go check out our website, betterwayathletics.com. If you're a youth sport organization, an athletic department at a high school, a governing body, we would love to come alongside and partner with you to help create alignment between parents and coaches and help families to do things well. This is not just about combating the crazy parents. This is about helping families like us, just normal people, trying to raise their children in a way that is good and healthy and whole. And so that's our mission. And hopefully for some family out there, we can help restore the joy of sport as you navigate it with your child. So make sure you check back in with us as we bring you great guests, great topics, great conversations each and every week.